Dead men tell no tales, but their ships speak volumes. Welcome to the Cursed Compass, where we explore the darkest maritime mysteries.
In the winter of 1712, a heavily armed Dutch East India galleon named the Zuytdorp sailed into the Indian Ocean and vanished. There were no distress calls and no survivors reaching port. The ship was carrying 280 passengers and crew, along with a staggering corporate fortune, nearly 250,000 newly minted silver coins intended for trade in Asia. This map shows the standard Dutch trading route of the era. Ships would ride the aggressive Roaring Forties winds across the southern Indian Ocean, sailing thousands of miles before making a sharp turn north toward Batavia, what is now Jakarta. But navigating by 18th century instruments was imprecise. Miscalculate your longitude by just a few degrees, and those same winds would push you directly into the jagged, uncharted coast of Western Australia. When the Zuytdorp failed to arrive, the Dutch East India Company didn't launch a search. The ocean was vast, and without any physical wreckage to follow, it seemed the ship had been erased from the map. 2 centuries later, in 1927, a dingo trapper was walking along a desolate stretch of the Western Australian coast when he stumbled across something that didn't belong in the sand. He found pieces of green, oxidized metal. When cleaned, they revealed a date, 1711. They were Dutch silver coins, resting right next to the charred remnants of an enormous clifftop fire. The Zuytdorp hadn't disappeared in deep water. It had smashed directly into a massive limestone fortress, sheer cliffs towering 250 meters above a violent reef-shredded surf. The presence of those coins and ashes at the top of the cliffs established a grim set of facts. A large group of the crew survived the initial wreck. They managed to scale the sheer rock face, dragging heavy chests of silver and wooden debris with them to keep a signal fire burning. We know a fleet of 4 Dutch ships followed the exact same route, just 17 days behind them. The survivors likely sat by those embers, staring out at the horizon, forced to watch the sails of their colleagues pass blindly in the distance. The crew didn't drown. They were marooned in a waterless wilderness. And when that signal fire finally burned out, they were forced to head into the interior. By the 1950s, geologist Phil Playford officially linked those clifftop coins to the missing Zuytdorp, prompting the first modern diving expeditions at the base of the cliffs. Beneath the churning waves, those early divers found pieces of the hull, cannons, and what they described as a carpet of silver, tens of thousands of coins fused to the ocean floor. That kind of wealth sitting in a remote stretch of ocean immediately drew rogue treasure hunters. Some even used gelinite explosives to blast the silver free from the reef. When the Western Australian Museum stationed a watchman in a caravan on the cliffs to protect the site, the looters escalated. They firebombed the caravan, forcing the museum to pull their surveillance for the safety of their staff. During the 5-year gap in official protection that followed, the legendary carpet of silver was almost entirely stripped from the seabed. Authorities have been tracking the stolen cargo ever since. In April 2025, an Australian Border Force sting operation recovered 88 of those looted coins, valued at over $240,000. But while modern law enforcement can track down the stolen silver, identifying the fate of the survivors is a much more complex biological investigation. With no fresh water on the Zuytdorp cliffs, the survivors had to abandon the wreck and trek inland, following the Murchison River. For decades, historians focused on an intriguing discovery 350 kilometers inland at an indigenous site called Walga Rock. There, painted alongside traditional art, is a depiction of a European sailing ship with strange pseudotext written underneath. The long-held theory was that a lone Dutch survivor from the Zuytdorp made it deep into the continent, living among the local tribes, and painted the ship as a final message. However, careful analysis of the painting's details eventually revealed it depicts the SS Santho, a 19th century steamship. That erased the ship painting as a direct connection to the Zuytdorp timeline. Investigators then turned to biology. A rare genetic disease called variegate porphyria, a condition highly specific to Afrikaners, was discovered in local Aboriginal populations. Since the Zuytdorp kicked up crew at the Cape of Good Hope, It was suggested the survivors integrated and intermarried with indigenous tribes. In 2002, researchers launched a DNA study comparing the local mutation markers against 18th century Dutch records. The results were a definitive negative match. The mutation actually came from 19th century Indonesian pareling laborers, not the shipwrecked crew. Through strict genetic and historical analysis, modern science systematically dismantled the primary leads, placing investigators right back where they started on those desolate cliffs. Despite decades of deep-sea diving, DNA testing, and criminal investigations, the final days of the Zuytdorp crew remain an absolute blank. The Australian continent is so vast and its environment so hostile that it could erase 70 desperate people without leaving a trace of their journey. Today, the wreck site is a heavily guarded protection zone, carefully monitored and memorialized by the institutions that continue to study its scattered remains. The story of this Zuytdorp stands as a stark illustration of the limits of historical inquiry. Some events are simply burned away by time and geography. We may have finally recovered the stolen silver, but the ghosts of the Zuytdorp still haunt the Murchison coast, their final campfire story forever swallowed by the silence of the cliffs.